people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney, and I would like to pay my respects to Aboriginal people who are here with us today, to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise the very important connection that Aboriginal people have with country and their role in caring for country, which is very important, and also their many contributions to our society. So it's a great pleasure to introduce two speakers today. So I think, we are doubly lucky to have two speakers who are here to talk about the ISO 20387 standard and review. And our speakers are Brodie Quine, and Brodie will be known to many of you. She is a lead assessor with NATA, and many of you will also know Samantha Higgins, who is chair of the ABNA Quality and Improvement Special Interest Group, and she's also the quality manager at the Victorian Cancer Biobank. So I think they're both going to present. Brodie will start and then hand over to Sam, and then we look forward to having time for some questions at the end. So thank you both so much for giving us your time, and we look forward to hearing what you're going to tell us about ISO 20387. Thank you.
No worries. I'll just get my screen sharing happening. That is not my presentation. Okay, can we see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect, excellent. So firstly, I would just like to say thank you to Jenny and the New South Wales Statewide Biobank for the opportunity to present at the seminar series alongside Sam. So as stated, I'll be giving an outline of the international standard ISO 20387 and the accreditation process. And Sam will be discussing the benefits of accreditation and delivering a personalised case study on the implementation of the standard. So I wanted to give a little bit of a background on myself first. So my background is actually in medical research for approximately 10 years, and that was both in Australia and the UK. So that was in a variety of disciplines, from Alzheimer's dementia to cancer immunology, and that was also a range of positions. So I started as an RA and I worked my way up into lab management. And I will admit, it wasn't until towards the end of my career in research that that international standards came into my realm and knowledge. So after those 10 years, I left the research world and I started with NATA just over 3 years ago now. I sit in a lead assessor role, as Jenny mentioned, and I work within a number of programs in NATA, and that includes sleep disorder services, medical imaging, and within the last 18 months, I cross-trained into biobanking program within NATA. So within my section of the presentation, I'm going to start off by giving some background on NATA and the role that we play within the development of standards, give some background information on ISO, and in particular ISO 20387, some general information on the recent systematic review of this standard, and then I wanted to cover the accreditation process, and in particular the preliminary visit that we conduct to facilities and the scope of accreditation. And then I'll finish up my section on the discussion with a quick summary before handing over to Sam to deliver the second half of this talk. So just a bit of background on NATA. NATA was first established after the war in 1947, and that was in response to the quality of weapons and ammunition it was producing. This image that you can see on the screen is of an early NATA assessment being conducted, and I am quite happy. It's safe to say that the average assessment team looks a little different today, with NATA employing a few more women into the ranks, and that includes our CEO, Jennifer Evans, as well. So we are Australia's leading national accreditation body, recognised by government to assess organisations against a number of international standards. So as you can see on the list on the slide, that includes testing and calibration, proficiency testing, human pathology, and a number of others. So NATA is also a member of the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation, so that's also known as ILAC, which is the international organisation for accreditation bodies. So all of the bodies which fall under ILAC must operate in accordance with the international standard 17011 for conformity assessment. So in accordance with this standard, NATA is actually audited every 4 years to ensure ongoing compliance. And this is a peer review process conducted by other members of ILAC. So just like we audit labs and facilities during an assessment, we are also audited and witnessed performing these assessment activities. Our last audit was conducted in March 2023, where we also requested to include ISO 20387, the general requirements for biobanking, to our ILAC mutual recognition agreement. So this made NATA the second accreditation body in the world to accept this recognition. So that means that any reports issued by NATA accredited labs have global acceptance. So in terms of biobanking, we're talking high quality biological material and its associated data being transferred between countries. So just a little bit about the role that NATA plays within standards. NATA is heavily involved within the standards development, both nationally and internationally. We have a number of experts sitting on Standards Australia committees. So that's from methods of testing concrete, button batteries to space systems and operations. There are currently 77 active committees that NATA is participating in, and this includes representatives from all over the company. So that's roles such as myself as a lead assessor to our sector managers, general managers, with our CEO sitting on the council for Standards Australia. So just out of interest, many of you may know that in May 2023, the Department of Industry, Science and Resources, also known as DISA, released a list of technologies that can impact Australia's national interest. So that's including our iconic prosperity, national security and social cohesion. This list is comprised of 7 fields, and one of those fields being biotechnologies. So within this document, it states the Australian government will support Australian industry to help develop international standards for biotechnologies, so which includes building strong international partnerships and trade relations. So this is where NATA fits in. We sit in between government relations and standards development, and we aim towards improving the quality and the profile of Australian industries. The relevant Standards Australia committee for today's discussion is HE32, Biotechnology. And this is a mirror committee for the International Standards Committee ISO TC 276 Biotechnology. So I am currently the NATA representative sitting on both the national and international committee, which consists of 5 working groups and 1 subcommittee. So these working groups are comprised of members from 40 participating countries across the globe, and they're always aiming to include more. So for today's discussion, ISO 20387, the general requirements for biobanking, was developed under Working Group 2, which is Biobanks and Bioresources within the International Committee. So some background on ISO and the 20387 development. ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. It was founded in 1947, also after the Second World War, with its headquarters situated in Geneva. So ISO is an independent, non-governmental international organization. It brings global experts together to agree on the best ways of doing things. And as you can see on the slide above, their mission, which I took directly from their website, is to make lives easier, safer, and better for everyone, everywhere. So as I previously stated, ISO 20387 was developed within Working Group 2 of ISO TC 276, Biotechnology. The standard was published in 2018, and Standards Australia, which is the national standards body here in Australia, adopted the standard in 2020. And it adopted it as an identical adoption. So therefore, there were no internal changes made to the document. It is exactly the same as when it was first published by the ISO committee. So this document is what is known as a conformity assessment standard. Therefore, accreditation bodies such as NATA are able to assess a service's compliance to this standard and grant accreditation. So therefore, you'll notice a number of clauses that are written within the standard are detailed in a way that is applicable to accreditation bodies. So NATA developed its accreditation program in 2021, and we continue to expand its profile within the biobanking community. So once standards are published, they then go on and they enter into a timeline of constant review. So every 5 years, the ISO committee responsible for the published standard vote as to whether they believe each standard should go for review or if they believe no amendments are necessary at this time. So if the committee votes yes, the process of review starts, and that goes into a 3-year timeline. So for ISO 20387, this vote took place at the end of 2023, with the first round of comments received in early 2024. So these comments were collated and subgroups within the committee were developed and tasked with reviewing all technical comments. So for us here in Australia, that meant a lot of late night online meetings going through hundreds of submitted comments. We didn't review any of the editorial comments at this stage. It was purely just technical comments. We had a timeline to review all of the technical comments before the annual in-person ISO-TC 276 meeting, which was held in Glasgow this year at the Strathclyde University, which is the picture on the screen. It was held mid-June 2024, and that was conducted over 6 full days. So 3 of those days were purely for Working Group 2 and to discuss this systematic review of the standard. So during this time, we covered the majority of technical comments and made great progress towards enhancing the standard. 2 of the major things that stood out during this review was that the interpretation of the standard was so wide and varied, and we found this was mainly due to the wording of certain clauses within the standard. So there's been progress towards refining a lot of the wording within those clauses. And secondly, that this standard was heavily aimed at biobanks handling human samples. So we spoke about the need to gather more stakeholders who bank non-human biospecimens and their associated data for their input into the review of the standard. So since this in-person meeting, a number of follow-up online meetings have been held, and the current draft standard is almost completed. So with the aim to open for its second round of commenting within the coming months. As this slide says, we will want to hear from you. So once the second round of commenting becomes available, we would really like to voice Australia's opinion regarding the reviewed standard. NATA has been in discussion with SAM and the ABNA Quality and Improvement Special Interest Group, and we believe the best avenue to gather this information would be through this group. So once comments are gathered, we would review them all, potentially via something like a focus group, which would include a number of the Standards Australia committee members. At this stage, the next round of commenting on the draft will be open within the next month and will undergo an 8-week consultation period. So I do not have specific details on which supplementary documents will be available for review at this stage, but once available, we will be able to give more information on that. And Sam will also be presenting a slide further in the talk in relation to seeking this feedback as well. So now I just wanted to detail the biobanking accreditation progress and just pick out a couple of areas that we find to be useful on the journey of accreditation. So NATA accreditation assessments are first and foremost a peer review process. We utilise volunteer technical assessors who perform an assessment under the direction of a NATA Lead Assessor. So NATA has over 3,000 volunteer assessors from multiple industries, with the majority of these being from accredited labs. It is the NATA Lead Assessor's role to know what is required by the standard, with the technical assessor bringing expert knowledge and technical competence to the assessment team. So these experts have years of experience within the relevant field, which we rely heavily on during these assessments. So technical assessors are selected based on their expertise and the scope of accreditation of the service applying. So for example, we would take a toxicology expert to a toxicology lab or a forensic scientist to a forensics lab. So for biobanking assessments, we would select technical assessors with expertise within the biobanking field. So this slide will show the basic steps or overview within the accreditation process. The accreditation journey starts with an initial inquiry. So we're contacted by the interested party, which is usually via the NATA website. There's a button on there, and or a phone call. So a NATA representative will then get in contact to discuss the accreditation programs and options your service may have in regards to accreditation. An inquiry package is then sent out. So this includes relevant information regarding the actual process of accreditation, just some general NATA information, and also provided with a cost estimate, which is dependent on the service's scope and size. So the first initial visit to the service is what we call an advisory visit. This is an on-site informal review of the organisation to identify any areas requiring attention in relation to the accreditation requirements. The initial assessment is then conducted with a technical assessor who holds relevant expertise within the biobanking field. So depending on the scope of application, there could be multiple technical assessors involved. Once accreditation is granted, the service then moves into a 3-year cycle. 18 months after the initial assessment, a surveillance visit is conducted. So this consists of NATA staff only reviewing quality management aspects and associated records of the service. Then a further 18 months, a reassessment with a technical assessor is conducted to complete a technical review of the service. So reassessments are sampling activities, and therefore a full review of the service is not always conducted at this assessment type. The process then falls into a continuous review of compliance between these two assessment types. So between the surveillance visit and the reassessment. Once accreditation is granted, the scope of accreditation originally applied for can be modified at any stage during this cycle between the surveillance and reassessment. So I really wanted to expand a little on the advisory visit of this process, as I think it is one of the most important and relevant for this discussion. So as I previously stated, this is the initial visit to the service. It is an on-site informal review of the organisation to identify any areas requiring attention in relation to the accreditation requirements. So this is also a really good opportunity for the service to clarify any questions or process steps that they have in relation to accreditation. Within this visit, we can review governance structures, review policies and processes that are currently in place, any areas of concern, and any ISO 20387 nuances, so that's such as future expansion or contingency plans. This is also a great opportunity to define the scope of service. So this includes discussing exactly what the starting material is. For example, that could be whole blood, plasma, PBMCs. It's up to the biobank what is fit for purpose for the service. And as I previously said, it is a great opportunity to ask questions. So for example, clarification and reassurance as to where a service sits on the accreditation journey, what to expect during an assessment, and the potential next steps moving forward. So after the visit, the service is provided with a letter which details what was discussed at the visit and any areas which may have been found to need further development. So it will also state if NATA believes you are ready to move forward with an initial assessment. Feedback from these visits has been very positive, and services have said that the reassurance that they are on the right track has been one of the biggest encouragements towards gaining accreditation. It is important to remember that it is up to you as the biobank to determine what is fit for purpose and how you want to document that. So we see a huge array of services, from those using very complex and expensive quality management and lens systems to small labs utilizing Excel, Word, and SharePoint. Both of these services are compliant. So I just wanted to make a note that it's important to remember that NATA does not consult, so therefore we cannot give specific advice on how to meet the requirements within the standard. The other criteria I wanted to touch on was the scope of accreditation. Your scope of practice and your scope of accreditation can be one and the same, or it could be certain pieces or parts of your service. ISO 20387 states that to be accredited, you must perform the activities of acquisition and storage, together with or all of the activities related to collection, preparation, preservation, testing, analysis, and/or distribution. So as I previously mentioned, this is where knowing your starting material is a good place to start. So for example, you could apply your scope to whole blood only, or you could start the acquisition process at the plasma level once derived. As I stated previously, as long as it is fit for purpose, it is up to the biobank. So now I just wanted to give you two examples of a scope of accreditation to show a small basic scope and an in-depth large scope to compare. Okay, so here we have the biological material and its associated data, also known as BMAD. And in this case, we'll just use whole blood as the example. So this service acquires the BMAD in accordance with minimum acceptance criteria, which is dictated by the biobank. The samples are stored in a -80 freezer. The service has quality control procedures which are defined according to proven techniques and fitness for the intended purpose. So for example, having QC samples which are taken out and thawed periodically to determine viability. When requested, the service distributes the BMAD to a recipient along with a report or certificate. Importantly, throughout this whole process, traceability of the BMAD is maintained. So now this is not to say that any other preparation, analysis, or testing is not being conducted on these samples. This biobank could be outsourcing this service to a laboratory outside of the biobank, for example, to an external pathology lab. It is just to say that within the scope of accreditation, the service would only be accredited for acquisition, storage, and distribution of the BMAD, which in this case is whole blood. So here we have the same example as previously shown, but with a few additions. So same as before, the BMAD we are starting with will be whole blood. The service is collecting a portion of the samples themselves, so therefore they're performing collection, still in accordance with minimum acceptance criteria detailed within acquisition. The service then processes the whole blood to extract plasma and also isolate PBMCs in preparation for storage. Now the BMAD not only includes whole blood, but plasma and PBMCs. Prior to storage, the samples undergo excuse me, testing and analysis internally, and associated data is stored appropriately. The samples are stored in -80 freezer as well as liquid nitrogen. So the quality control procedures have been expanded to incorporate different types of storage, and QC samples are stored for the 3 material types. So when requested, the service distributes the BMAD to a recipient along with a report or certificate. And once again, throughout this whole process, traceability of the BMAD is maintained. So this is a really good example to show how a service can start with a small, refined scope and expand and grow their scope of accreditation as time goes on. So this particular service has now expanded their accreditation to include collection, acquisition, preparation, preservation, storage, testing and analysis, and distribution of the biological material and associated data, which now includes whole blood, plasma, and PBMCs. So just in summary, before I hand over to Sam, the key takeaways that I wanted to share today are know your starting material, so where you want the accredited biobanking process to start. So is it at the whole blood stage or is it at PBMC level? Start small and expand when further developed. Just as I previously showed in the scope examples, the accreditation process can be refined and expanded over time. Risk-based and fit for purpose. So it is up to the biobank to determine the criteria and the fitness for purpose. And seek out information and help from sources known to accreditation and or been through the process. So Sam will be sharing some tools and resources in her presentation that include NATA documents, but also just don't reinvent the wheel. If there are hospital, university, institute policies that meet the criteria, utilize those where you can. And one thing that we see often is that a service is a lot closer to the finish line than they think. So I put my contact details on this slide. Feel free to contact me if you want any further information or have any questions in regards to NATA or the accreditation process. Sam will also share the same email address at the end of the presentation. Thank you, and I will pass over to Sam for the second part of the presentation.
Thanks, Brodie. Fantastic introduction. Hopefully everyone, even myself, you learn little things the more you think about the scope and the pathways that you can take. I'm just going to get my screen up and then I'll begin. All right, so as Brodie and Jenny mentioned, I'm going to take a little bit more of a deep dive into a sort of more specific biobank example, but I have tried to be quite broad because I know that there's, not only human biobanks, but, enviro or other material biobanks or even, heavily data focused groups working. So I want to make sure that some of the examples and things that I say is quite applicable. But before I begin, I also wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of which I'm coming from today, who are the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And I want to pay my respects to their elders past and present and those emerging. And I do want to extend my respect to the Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who might be present in this virtual room today. So I'm wearing a couple of hats today. So I'm the quality manager at the Victorian Cancer Biobank, which is located at the lead agency of our consortium, the Cancer Council Victoria, here in Melbourne, in Australia. And I'm also the secretary of the ABNA, which is the Australasian Biospecimen Network Association, which, for those who don't know, is Australia's peak body for biobanking. also within ABNA, as was mentioned earlier on, I'm one of the chairs of one of the new ABNA special interest groups, which is an initiative that has recently been started through the ABNA network, and I'll talk a little bit more about what this might look like and how you can be a part of that later on. I also currently sit as the Vice Chair of the ISBA Standards Community of Practice, a biobanking member group within the Global Biobanking Society of ISBA. So a little bit about me, I thought, before I get started. With our biobank not yet accredited, why would I be invited to, speak about standardisation and accreditation? And so a little bit of context as to my sort of career path so far is that prior to biobanking, I actually spent around 15 years in accredited or very close to accredited or pre-accredited environments across a range of different standards. So, for example, both locally here in Melbourne as well as in the USA, worked with organisations following forensic pathology and radiology. So, for example, I worked at the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine, where I completed a master's degree involving implementation of postmortem imaging techniques to accredited facilities. So, sort of changing some of the work practices around that space. And working with San Francisco Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, where I did a range of things, but it included coordinating a tightly controlled whole organisation move of the forensic facility with all divisions to a new state-of-the-art facility. So I've also worked as a forensic scientist with Victoria Police here in Victoria. And in this role, I worked in a new purpose-built facility that was needing to expand their scope to achieve NATA accreditation under their multi-site accreditation framework. So I worked, not only as a scientist, but also in developing our, documentation in order to make sure we meet those requirements for that accreditation. So I'm not sure if this makes me lucky or not, but much of my career has been spent as a scientist navigating complex facility and laboratory workflows, and also standardisation organisational change while maintaining compliance or trying to meet new regulatory or accreditation standardisation requirements. I'm not always about QC in the workplace, though. I love to cook and try new foods, and so I thought I'd share that my favourite food that came out of the USA time that I had over there was a pecan pie. So anyone who hasn't had this, please make it at home here or try this. It's probably easier to make and possibly better than a sticky date pudding, to give you an example. And Starbucks or no Starbucks, hands down, Australia does better coffee, as I'm sure many people would agree. So I want to start with addressing the big elephant in the room question: why even choose accreditation or even consider, standardisation or even this standard, whether it's right for your biobank? And I think it's a good place to start because of in our Australasian region, there's been perhaps what I think is probably a slower uptake of accreditation to the new ISO standard for biobanking than I expected. So just for context, we have one biobank that's accredited to the standard so far in Australia, but there's now around 33 biobanks globally, and that's increasing fairly significantly, each year. I think we expect it to continue to increase. So I think in Australia we'll start seeing more people, being able to increase. And I'm really hoping that today's conversation can have conversations around this and really encourages people to realise that there's benefits in standardisation and also benefits to even just begin to pursue it for your biobank. So beyond biobanking, standardisation is not new. So as Brodie mentioned, it's everywhere: manufacturing, healthcare, to the concrete used in the footpath you walk on. So to me, standardisation is really the process of achieving consistent outputs, thus maximising the value of the effort you're putting in. And as a biobanker, and many of us wear many hats, we are always putting 100% effort, 110% effort in. So there's clear correlations of standardisation with economic benefit. For example, a report in Canada calculates standardisation contributed to $5.8 billion of the total $33 billion growth in Canada's GDP back in 2019. If we look locally, and I think Brodie also sort of indicated this, is we know the life science sector is big in Australia. It's got a lot of focus. It's rapidly growing, and it includes or has the breadth across many or most of the research sectors we as biobanks support. So for me, as biobankers, we can easily draw the inference to the broad ways of investing in standardisation in our biotechnology sector, including our biobanks. However, I'm also a realist. I'm not going to pretend that this is easy or it can be achieved by everyone. But I think it's important to realise it might be easier than what people are easier, or at least more. If we collaborate, we might be able to get across the line a little bit faster. Typically in research, we're plagued with funding and sustainability challenges, and so I think we all need to be smart about how we do accreditation in our country, or at least at this point. So looking at the diagram on the right, the first place to start if you want a standardisation to bring high value to the biobank is to align the accreditation scope to areas of biobanking which you have already identified value drivers for your biobank, or even better, where you hope to grow competitive advantage or be leaders in a certain part, a certain field. Like Brodie said, you can start small, you can build from there. There's a lot of information on this slide, but and I can provide these references at the end if anyone needs them. But there's information out there to help you build up benefit case studies for biobanks that might want to pursue accreditation, and these range from benefits that range from streamlining operations, allowing scale up, increasing confidence in specimen collection integrity. You can build trust, create financial opportunity, as well, of course, increase the quality of research that stems from your biobank. Discussing with many biobanks on their progression of implementing ISO 20387, both in Australia and globally, I've found there's generally two approaches that, and maybe even a combination of these. There's holistic, whereby internal or strategic benefits to implementation arise, and there's a planned stepwise approach to achieving goals, or starting with a small scope and perhaps building from there. Or there's some more sort of refined targeted approaches where there's a really specific targeted motivation or enabler, such as building it into a grant and having milestones in a grant or funding piece, or key clients or an invested party that have indicated a benefit for the biobank to achieve accreditation, and therefore there's that real motivator to get across the line. I think what I find is, these targeted approaches tend to have a more rapid timeline for implementation, as there's sort of people really invested in seeing those outcomes. But I think both holistic or targeted are very acceptable and encourage ways to go about implementing the ISO 20387 standard at the biobank. So as logic will tell you, there needs to be value gain to pursue any initiative, and the most common of these that I see or hear fall in three categories, which also happen to align with fairly common challenges that are voiced and faced by biobanks globally. So that is to achieve or improve interoperability, both with the specimens and the data generated from the specimens, and that could be interoperability locally, interstate, or even between biobanks nationally or globally, internationally. With sustainability, using accreditation as a signal to end users of the quality, but also to help manage organisational risks and make sure you can maintain your biobank's operations long term, or simply to help try and reduce the variation in the provision of source material, which is required for downstream research. I think everyone probably in this room would know it's been postulated pretty widely that standardisation in biobanks could greatly contribute to the huge problem we face of irreproducible research. I now want to share some of the efforts the VCB have gone to, and kind of a bit of the mindset that we've gone to in terms of our journey towards the ISO accreditation, eventual ISO accreditation. Importantly, majority of what I'm showing you is actually requires minimal resource outlay, and the work that we have achieved to date has been completed while maintaining a very high output on routine biobanking activities. While a lot of this is part of my role, it's actually not the full scope of my role. It also reflects the power of the knowledge sharing between our consortium biobank members and similar biobanks, but also the collaborative work of our whole consortium network, and the great work that all of our partners are doing in our consortium network to progress towards accreditation. Really, we've got a mindset of having many people working together to achieve a common goal. I also want to note the VCB, in terms of processes, being a consortium and multi-site model, it's actually very complex in terms of processes, and many single-site biobanks could easily achieve similar goals or work in a similar period of time with a different or maybe a refined or simpler approach. So as an overview, the Victorian Cancer Biobank, for those who aren't familiar with us, we are a consortium network, as I mentioned, that's in place to collect, manage and provide high quality biospecimens, data and services through our network of biobanks. We have supported since 2006 over 300 research projects, both locally and internationally. We have been very grateful to the 40,000 donors and more that have participated and donated their valuable specimens to our biobank. And we currently house across our network over 485,000 specimens in a range of room temperature, cold and liquid nitrogen storage. You can see our partners here, and also we're very grateful to the Department of Health, who's our funder. So the steps for implementation or even for organisational progress obviously looks different for every biobank, but ours is based in a long-term strategy, some of which is only peripherally influenced by our goal to achieve ISO accreditation. We've engaged our governance body and our stakeholders along the journey, and this is the first of a two-part slide. But as you'll see, we have progressed towards accreditation while we are receiving many parallel benefits of small milestones that are helping our everyday activities. This means that all the effort that we're putting in towards progressing towards accreditation is not going to be lost, or we have never reached that final goal or want to change our scope, or if we reach it slower than or faster than anticipated. Firstly, we had a change in our governance, and that took an opportunity to be able to make a few changes in strategy. And one of those changes was to onboard a central quality manager to align and harmonise processes and start working towards goals such as certification and accreditation. So the first milestone was actually to achieve the international certification to CEDANet, which was completed under my leadership within this first 6 months of starting at the VCB back in 2020. For the consortium, we've already got a strong model of harmonised processes and have from the start. And like most of us, we're bound to the same various ethical, safety and good clinical practice requirements. And that means that much of the ISO level requirements are already being met as part of our routine practice. However, we've identified a few key areas that of improvement that would increase our ability to operate in a more standardised way. We began improving our quality management system to allow us to implement measures that demonstrate how we achieve consistent outputs from our multi-site network, as well as tightening up our approach to risk and contingency to meet or exceed best practice. We've also just finished a major upgrade to all of our critical storage and laboratory infrastructure, thanks to a large grant from the Department of Health. So with over 50% of our projects now actually, and more so in recent years, requiring the effort of a coordinated effort of more than one site, this obviously being one of the key benefits of having the multi-site consortium model. But we know that these processes can't be looked at or improved in isolation, and to do quality management effectively, we really need tools in place, such as auditing, corrective preventative action for structured multi-site continuous improvement. So improving our incident reporting system has also, allowed us to address the issues both at the root cause of the problem, which may not be on the site that's actually reported or uncovered the issue. We address any client feedback more effectively, and we've led to being able to use trend analysis to even look for areas to focus our strategic and improvement efforts. So with the ISO standard being very focused on the concept of fit for purpose, being a biobank that seems to have endless purposes, that is, we're a multi-tumour stream biobank, we have over 60 end user groups per year, and we, I sort of see us as having many different purposes. We really have started commencing some analysis on this and, trying to understand what are our downstream user requirements from our products and services? What are our researchers doing? What is the emerging research interest that we might have to cater for in the future? We're looking at quality metrics that might be, worth looking at now for our existing collection, but also something that might help us educate ourselves towards when we're in, an accredited world. Now we're in the phase of improving efficiency, ensuring we have a timely service and strong capabilities for our donor engagements, as well as implementing an electronic QMS system, which is really going to help our where we need to be before we apply for the accreditation. So are we ISO ready? Just thought I'd run through a few little examples to give a look at where I see that we are well on our way, and hopefully you can see areas that mirror procedures in your own biobanks or in biobanks you work with that can encourage consideration of standardisation also. So one thing I want to make sure that people are aware of, that when you first read the standard, is that it's very important to look at the terminology. So there's, provided definitions on these terms within the standard, but particularly difference between shall and should. So I thought I'd use this data management example where there's a number of shall requirements, so requirements that must be met for data management, which we meet through various documentation or processes such as user manuals and defined data dictionary and verification processes, for example. However, there's also a recommended should requirement to have a catalogue of material available for users. So while we have an online catalogue, which is actually of great use to our existing and potential new clients, you do not have to have this to become accredited under ISO 28387, because that catalogue is under a should, so a recommended requirement. When we received the grant to install and replace a lot of our equipment across our different sites, we actually looked towards the standard to see what the level of requirements would be. Notice that there's a risk-based approach required, and so we've categorised our items to be either critical or less critical as it may be, and taking that risk-based approach in order to understand where our processes need to be the most fit for purpose. We've obviously maintained equipment registers at the level that is required for the standard, leveraging resources through pathology departments. We have improved our documentation on where we integrated with pathology, being hospital embedded biobanks. We utilise or outsource or collaborate with these pathology on things like collaboration or preventive maintenance and contingency. Some of these are already under accredited lab processes, so we've noted where these are as part of our, building our understanding of what our scope might need to look like. And also, most of our equipment has to be implemented under the local impact or pathology requirements, which would meet or exceed the requirements actually required for most research. In terms of risk and contingency, we've really spent a fair bit of time working in this space, because not only is it for eventual accreditation, but it's important for any biobank to work in this. And we've received really parallel benefits for managing our risk in a really proactive way and in a multi-site way. And one example was a really strong response to a cybersecurity incident, and which required a rapid multi-site response to maintain, obviously, mitigate the risk, but also then to resume operations in a way that wasn't so impactful. We've mapped and strengthened our key risks and mitigations around privacy, data, specimen loss, freezer failure, and that type of thing. So it's a really valuable tool now, but also would be obviously a requirement under in the standard to be having strong work in this space. Our quality management system, as I mentioned, we've built up, built up our capacity or refined some of the existing capacity to use a range of tools, documentation and templates that ensure we can manage the various quality documentation requirements. And this is even just a requirement to maintain our CEDARNet certification. While our system likely already meets the QMS requirements of the standard in its manual or sort of manual form, we've identified the efficiency and value of implementing essential electronic QMS. This is also a requirement to have a single QMS for a multi-site biobank. So we want to have that be a really robust infrastructure that we can rely upon when it comes to managing processes and records in the future. So now I'm just going to provide a few tools and resources. Like I said, please just reach out if you don't get these down. I'm happy to pass these on. There's really 3 that I want to point out to people that don't know, if they don't know that these exist. So along with the standard, there's the ISO technical report, that's 2278758, the implementation guide. And that really is helpful because it provides definitions such as explaining the concepts of fit for purpose or assistance in interpreting different clauses. And so it can be a really valuable tool to go along with your reading of the ISO 20387 standard. In terms of gap analysis tools, NATA has a worksheet available that is, free to download, even if you haven't actually got the standard yet. But there's a worksheet there that can give you a guideline as to the things you'll need to look at if you're considering accreditation. It's really helpful. And the last one is a recent free resource that has been published through the ISPA resource, and that's the Best Practices 5th edition. So like I said, it's a free to download. It was released in December 2023, and it's really got improved sections around risk and quality and data in this revision. All the areas that I'm discussing today are detailed in such detail in the best practices now that really there's a lot of education and references there that you can link to if you're trying to, pursue or improve any areas of these that I'm talking about. So where to next on your journey? Download the standard. I mean, if you haven't done that already, please do so. Talk to accredited laboratories, organisations pursuing ISO. Working not in silos is obviously really important. Advocate for the importance of quality and biobanking standardisation in Australasia in whichever way you can. I think that's one of our roles as biobankers that we can work on. Just before I finish, I wanted to circle back to the systematic review that is happening within the next few months. So as part of the Quality Improvement Special Interest Group, we would like to coordinate and see a great value in coordinating the review, Australia's review comments for this sort of global review that Brodie explained before. So we'd really like you to reach out and join our efforts in this space, but also our special interest group doesn't actually focus just on accreditation. We're really about quality in all areas of improvement in biobanking, no matter where you are on your journey. So, we've got a range of initiatives that we're starting to work on. And then broadly, also invite you to some of the other forums, opportunities, events coming up. There's there's various SIGs through the ABNA now that are ways to connect with various biobanking professionals in your specific fields. There's a biobanking conference coming up in Adelaide, which our SIG's hoping to host an Ask Us Everything type session, so you can come and drop in and say hello to us and have a chat. I would also invite you to come and join the ISPA Standards Community of Practice if you're an ISPA member and you'd like to join that global community. And obviously you can reach out to Brodie or myself. With that, I might stop sharing, and I think we've hopefully still got a bit of time for questions.
Thank you both. Yes, we certainly do. That was a wonderful 2 talks, really helpful. And I think very complimentary as well in terms of what you both presented. So I'm wondering if anybody does have any questions, you're welcome to add them to the chat. You're welcome to just pop up your hand. I guess in terms of maybe, I mean, something that I was thinking about was that kind of intersection between getting involved in quality and career development in biobanking. So I'm wondering whether, you know, I mean, I think, you know, Brodie, you gave a good, you know, sort of overview of the benefits of standardization in terms of, you know, to organizations and the intention of ISO standards sort of internationally at a broad level. But what about the benefits for people who get involved on the ground? Would you like to comment on, either of you would like to comment on those things?
I think Sam might probably have a bit better, I think, experience in this field. If Sam, you wanted to
yeah, so I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind is that quality is only going to be achieved if you invest in and you rely on your people. One of the 7 quality management principles that you know, really widely known, they're very broad, is around people. And I think when you know, not only for, you know, achieving things at the level of, you know, the standardization level, but you know, there's a lot of examples where people have improvements or you know, or career opportunities, or you know, increasing the breadth of the skill set of the staff that they have by getting involved in quality. You know, some examples might be that they, you know, become, you know, really proficient in, say, risk or in a technical skill. There's a really strong competency focus of the standard as well. So making sure that you have recorded, you know, good training and recorded competency and, you know, ongoing professional development. I think all of these things not only help your biobank achieve good outputs, but they help investing in staff, which might, you know, retain staff longer and maybe attract people to biobanking. I think we want, if we're such a specialized field, that if you attract people in, you really want to make sure you can retain them by making the work interesting and making it, you know, world class, that sort of thing.
Yeah, they're really good points. Sorry, go ahead, Brodie. Yep.
No, I was just going to add to Sam, like, yeah, that absolutely on the mark with those. It's just to add to that, it's, you know, I don't think there's ever a downside to expand someone's, I guess, skill set. And yes, this talk was on ISO 20387, but there's so many international standards out there. They all have the same, I guess, similar framework, and to have that skill set and then potentially move on to another biobank and then be able to implement those quality activities in a new biobank, like that, there is no downside I don't see as to expanding the skill set, and especially into quality.
Yeah, they're good points, I think, increasing the ability of people to, you know, move between roles and things like that. So if people have got questions, please pop them in the chat, put up your hand. But I might have just one other question. So I guess if there's a lot of people online today, and some people might be thinking, oh, you know, in my role in the biobank, like, there's no scope for me to be involved with this. Say, for example, if I'm working at a technical level or something like that, what would be your message to people who want to get involved? For example, in reviewing the standard, is there a role for everybody, I guess is the question.
I guess one of the best avenues would be to get involved with ABNA and the Quality Improvement SIG. You know, so I'm sure Sam can talk more about this, but they're looking at a number of quality initiatives, and it is open to anyone who is interested. So Sam, did you want to say anything more?
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, certainly. I mean, ABNA in general, or, you know, any professional organisation, including ABNA and the SIG, is really good in this space. But also, I think I feel like a lot of the quality and process improvements actually doesn't just come from, you know, the leaders of a biobank or even the, you know, the governance groups. They might have the great ideas, but the real work and the knowledge that's required to improve a process, make sure a process can work, actually comes from staff, you know, in all aspects of the biobank, depending on where you work. I don't think there's you know, there's, in saying that though, you know, there's aligning the skills of the and the interests of the people that, not everyone likes to write documents and SOPs, for example. So, you don't try and pick a person who hates writing documents and SOPs to be someone who's going to build a skill set in that space. They might be actually really interested in being in auditing, not the documenting part, but they might like to look at other places, and they might like to even just do some cross training in different areas. There's many ways to develop staff in this space. But I think in terms of connecting, one of the things that I'm passionate about, I want to see a lot more in Australia, and I think that's because I've seen it in other industries I've worked in, is connecting people with similar-minded quality goals and trying to not reinvent the wheel. So the more that we work in together and collaboratively instead of in silos, trying to do these quality improvement journeys, the better off we're going to be. I think Australia's, one of the most difficult thing is that we're often struggle with, say, funding, or with, our biobanks are not as big as, say, the world's biggest biobanks, but we do have this huge collaborative nature in Australia, and I think we want to see that in biobanking and more, more so as well as in the biobanking quality space. Sharing templates, resources. That's something the SIG is working on, is trying to produce some of these templates that might be globally, across biobanks used regardless of discipline, so that we can expedite those little pieces of work by providing resources, and we'd love input on that.
Thanks, Sam. And I guess some people might be aware that, the Statewide Biobank oversees the certification program here in New South Wales. And a key feature of that is, of course, those SOP templates and education resources. And I mean, anybody can access those resources, even though certifications currently for people in New South Wales. If you want to have a look at our website, so I might put that into the chat as well. Does anyone have any other questions? We've got a couple more minutes, particularly while I put this into the chat so you can see our website. But I think that's a really good point about the need for collaboration and not reinventing the wheel, because that can happen in biobanking, and it's a lot of the time the solution's there. We just don't know about it.
Yeah, I think we're particularly hoping to pull those resources together and make people the visibility on what is available. Some of the resources I shared today is really just a snapshot at what we know is available. It's ready to, quality manuals that actually are already online. I can point people to the direction of those people who have published theirs, either internationally, or resources on how to build a quality, a quality manual. Things like that is really, I'm happy to always try and connect people, as is our SIG is full of people that have got lots of different resources. So yeah, we'd really encourage people to connect with us and, share their journeys, their struggles, share where you're a bit stuck or unknown, and hopefully we can use some collective minds to be able to improve quality, but also help people reach that maybe the goal of accreditation, if that's where they're headed.
Well, thank you both so much. It was a wonderful talk. I know that I'm sure a lot of people are going to benefit from the recording as well. So thank you both again for your time. Thanks for everyone for coming, and our next talk will be on the 11th of September. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank